Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 280 for Monday, January 15th, 2024. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Jonny, but you may know him better on the internet as Pixel Riffs. Hello, sir.
Hello, and we are very excited today, very delighted to be joined by Nmon from the team at Mojang working on vanilla Minecraft. We've already been chatting a little bit on the Render Distance as the extended version of the podcast, which our patrons can hear by supporting the show over at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. But listeners may be familiar with Gnembon from almost a decade of Minecraft YouTube videos in which he unpacks Java Edition game mechanics, often leading to farms which many of us still use today. You can find all of those over at youtube.com/Gnembon. Before joining Mojang, he was well known for Carpet Mod, a suite of tools which help with technical projects, benchmarking farms, and even introduce sought-after mechanics like pushable tile entities. These days, however, he's a full-time part of the Minecraft team, having joined Mojang in 2021. Gnembon, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for your introduction. I couldn't put it better together. You mentioned all the important bits. This means that I don't need to add anything here. And actually, you actually forgot to introduce yourself. But the only thing that I will add is that it's really good to be here.
Thank you so much. It's really good to have you. And I have Joel to introduce me. So I feel like the introductions kind of cascade on this show, which is great. Now, Joel and I have been doing this for a while. I think everybody knows who we are at this point. So hopefully if they're listening to the show, and if it's your first time listening to the Spawn Chunks, of course, welcome. If you're excited to listen into what Gnembon has to say today, then obviously welcome on in. And we've got a bunch of other episodes, both featuring Joel and myself, other guests, even other folks from the Minecraft team. So we've got a catalog of stuff for everybody to deep dive if it's your first time here.
And as their first time here, Gnembon, normally when we log in, we give our guests the opportunity to log in first. So what has been new in Minecraft for you lately?
Yeah, so at Mojang, we have actually a small company server that we can use to play ourselves and with our families. And as you can imagine, that will be the best and the safest place to have you and your kids to play on. So I've been playing on there a little bit. Joined it with the intention to play quite casually, but I previously used to do a lot of technical stuff. So I would say my approach right now is more like tech casual. So I basically try to figure out stuff from my memory, not looking at it at like tutorials, block by blocks, and do it all in survival without mods and anything. And this actually gives a little bit different perspective to how you play. So when I joined that server, like my immediate reaction was like, what do I need first? Like, I need probably like access to shulker boxes. So imagine like with iron tools trying to figure out how to make a shulker farm. And the design I had in mind involved a lot of slime blocks. So I first started to build quite a rudimentary slime farm put together from like using like basic tools. Then went to the end and built a shulker farm. And this actually gives a little bit different perspective where if you follow like tutorials, like they work great, but then in real life, you don't have flying and things can go south, shulkers can get angry. You realize that those designs really do not encompass like the actual need of a survival player. Then you try to figure out like how to provide the good access to different like components of the farm. With shulkers, they can get angry at the player, and then everything goes like terribly south. So you have to have like I added like mechanisms to allow to remove temporarily shulkers from the farm and bring them back. So if things break, then you can actually go there as a survival player and fix it, like adding ladders everywhere so you can easily climb from here and there. And then basically I follow this kind of like a rabbit hole of technical builds. So once I had shulker farms, like, okay, now it will be good to build some sort of a storage system. But then you need a lot of iron. So I found like an abandoned iron farm that was already broken because like some villagers were missing, some zombies that are used for bait were not there anymore. So I fixed it, and then I realized, now I have an elytra and I need some rockets. So built another farm to to basically have some gunpowder and other mob drops as well. Then realize at this point it will be good to have something to cover your experience. So obviously I went through a guardian farm route. Recently been digging out the perimeter for it, basically just the bounding box of the ocean monument, and learned a few things that I actually didn't expect. Like when you're building walls in survival, like players typically sneak, and then you can place up to 3 blocks below you, and then you sneak to the next position. But if you're underwater, you can actually swim, while still having this sneaking enabled. And that actually allows you to not only move way faster, because when you're swimming underwater, you're actually way faster than sneaking on land, but also you have access to actually 4 blocks down. So building those giant dividing walls underwater is actually way faster than above water, which is interesting. I didn't expect that. So you learn new things when you are going through the path of farms, from farm to farm, from resource to resource, and basically realizing that, now I've built a guardian farm. In order to have a lot of dark prismarine, you have to have a black dye farm. So what do I do for now? For that. So it's interesting to get into these kind of relationship and groove again. So that was fun.
I want to encourage everybody to wind this podcast back 5 minutes to where Nmon said, I joined this server to play casually. And then you just listed all of these farms that you like. I had to have this, and then this, I had to have that. And I'm doing all of this with only iron tools. And man, it's so cool to hear that, especially people who are part of the development team now. I mean, you're a fairly recent addition, but obviously you were so involved with the Minecraft community before this. I think it's so good to hear that you are still discovering new ways to play and finding new techniques on the fly, even as you are, being part of the team that's introducing new features to the game. I think that's incredible.
Yeah, and this is actually something that many people who I work with, who maybe didn't have too much experience with Minecraft, because I don't know, there might be some people around I don't know, company administration or things like that. They don't have to be gamers. They often realize that the development team at Mojang is very interesting, because in many game studios, people develop games and they go back home and they play other games, or they don't play games at all. While at Mojang, lots of people play Minecraft all the time, either during work or after work, or we have also dedicated times when you can spend actually playing the game to learn it better. And yeah, that's actually very interesting to see.
When you're coming across an existing farm, like an existing technical project that is older or broken, as you mentioned with the iron farm, do you find it more challenging to tweak it and get it working again, or is it easier for you to start fresh and just do something new on your own?
Yeah, that's actually before, I would say it's probably easier to just create from scratch something on the side. But in practice, that's what I've been doing. There was an old Enderman farm on the server, the one that uses the Y0 Enderman spawning. Mm-hmm. And it was broken. It was missing the Endermite. And I was like, dang, it's this is the most difficult part in building of this farm, is to get that Endermite in. And it's and I don't want to watch tutorials for it. If I place it incorrectly, another Enderman will get to it, and it'll be all in vain. So what I did actually is I redesigned that farm a little bit. So when you are in a safe spot that the players would typically be, actually remove a bunch of blocks so you can actually aggravate Endermen on your own, because they're not that far away. They can see you if you want to. And this way you have a working farm that doesn't need an Enderman. It just uses the player as the bait. So you can just choose up to 70, because that's how many Endermen are there. You could just choose, look at all 70 Endermen and just wait until they come in. You just all basically harvest them, get XP, and you can just do it in waves. And the farm is technically working. Maybe it's not as fast as it used to be, but at least it's functional and didn't require an endermite. So.
And I think the reason that Endermite is dead is because of the recent changes to mob reach, thanks to mobs being able to reach anything that's within their hitbox. So you know who to blame when it comes to that farm being broken as well, right?
So having said that, I think in this case it will be that actually the other way around, because Enderman used to have their reach didn't change at all. Because Endermen are what's called the standard size, which is the player width, which is 0.6 blocks. So all those mobs that are quote unquote standard size zombies, Endermen, they all have the same reach at this moment of time. I think this was just because someone, when putting that farm together, didn't put it properly. That's why. So if you are like following tutorials on the internet, typically there are multiple places where things can go wrong, and things can go wrong in a way that you don't even understand. Like if you don't understand how the farm works exactly, that's where you can make mistakes that may bite you later on down the line, and the farm may work for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then it'll randomly stop, and you may not know why. So that's why I think like learning how the mechanics works and learning how the farm design works rather than learning block by block is better, because then you can first of all you can make improvements if you want to. You can customize your builds same as you customize like aesthetic builds. So I think this is like the better way to play it. Although this is also very, very, very difficult. I don't think the game does a really particularly good job to explain those mechanics to players, and that's something where more improvements probably would be needed.
Well, it's something where community knowledge has taken up the slack for so long, I feel like.
Exactly.
There was a thread on the Minecraft Reddit that I was reading this week, which I would personally argue with this take, but they said Minecraft does not give you enough information to complete the game on your own. And people were arguing about how, even though we have newer things like, I say newer, at this point they're quite old, but ruined nether portals teaching you what a nether portal should look like. And there are a few players who've posted YouTube Let's Plays in which they've completed Minecraft without any spoilers. They haven't been to the Minecraft wiki or looked up other people's videos to understand how to beat the game. And advancements played a huge part in that, being able to see the proposed progression of the game through that advancement tree can be helpful, but there are some things that remain cryptic. And back in the day, if you look at early games like Legend of Zelda, where for a start they would come with an instruction manual and a fold-out map that kind of told you how to do stuff, but part of the point of the game was still that you shared information with your friends, and that anybody else who had the original Legend of Zelda, you'd go to their house and they'd show you this cool thing that they found by accident. And obviously now with the internet, environments like that are becoming more and more scarce. And I think game development changes to match that with the introduction of more obvious tutorials and games teaching you the mechanics that you will need to understand the game as you progress. And Minecraft stands out in being fairly hands-off with its approach to teaching new players, but that is, I think, so often because the game relies on community knowledge and has done for more than a decade.
Yeah, this is not ideal in the sense that we understand that the game should be more explicit in like letting players know exactly about the mechanics, and this is something that we are striving for with the new features, to make sure that they are clearly understandable, or maybe try to like provide I don't know, replacements, like, for the lack of the better word, for like for example with the Armadillo. You can brush it to get scutes off of it, but if you don't know how to do it, or if you don't know that you can use a brush on it, it'll just drop the scute randomly on like from time to time. So if you don't know it, you can just chase those little like poor little critters and just collect the scutes this way. So and there is also a value in a discovery of certain like mechanics. If you're not taught if you're not told what to do, but you discover something on your own, that brings an extra joy, an extra level of joy. So it's a very fine balance between not telling players what to do and telling players too much.
Yeah. We will get more into the Armadillo a little bit later in our main discussion. Yeah. But something you said earlier really resonated with me, and you were talking about building stuff in survival and, first of all, not following tutorials, but also being more reactive to things that went wrong on the fly. And as somebody who, obviously, a lot of your tutorials are presented in creative because that's the best environment for you to both show a lot of the mechanics and also not be bothered by shulkers when they're shooting at you from a shulker farm or something like that. And it's one of the approaches I've taken in my survival guide series, where I'm presenting tutorials, and it's so tempting to cut to a creative world to explain the setup for the farm that I'm doing. But every step of the way, I've told myself, people need to see the amount of effort that goes into this. If they're going to follow a tutorial, it really helps them to understand how much time they're going to have to commit to a project of this size. I mean, you talked about draining the perimeter for a Guardian farm, and that is always a large, time-consuming project, and there aren't many fast ways of doing it if you want to do it to the extent where everything is drained out, there's no water on the inside in the area of the ocean monument. That's always a big project. So it helps people to have their information presented to them, but not be given the fast-forwarded approach to it. Sort of be seeing the effort every step of the way.
Yeah, and this is a very good example of something that some people may actually perceive boring, like how many times you can drain an ocean monument. But from my perspective, the more I do it, is in survival, the more I learn how to do it better, and that's also is something that brings me some levels of accomplishment, brings me joy, essentially.
Yeah,
I think one of the things that you mentioned about the farms and scaling and trying to figure things out has been one of my favorite things about bringing some of your farm designs into the Citadel, in that we're a small server and we don't need 60,000 drops an hour or whatever the farm happens to put out. And I really like the challenge of taking a design that I've found online and both scaling it down so that I know we can use it and it's something that I can accomplish in a reasonable amount of time. It's not overkill for what we need. But then also adding the decoration. You talked about making things look nice earlier. And that's one of the things I really like about building technical things in survival Minecraft is you're bringing it into your existing world. It's not just in a void. It's not just floating in space. And you have to, if you have the right, the kind of mindset that I do, I want to bring it into the world and integrate it both functionally, but also fashionably, into the surrounding world. So when it comes to things like, digging out an ocean monument and learning how to do that better, I hear you. And that's what I feel like I get out of taking a technical project and saying, okay, well, that's a really cool and efficient box, but how can I make it look nice?
Yeah.
So when you're playing on the server and doing the technical things, have you started to go into the idea of decorating your farms and making them look like they are integrated into a multiplayer world?
I've always strived to essentially do that. On my in my videos, I typically would just focus on the farm itself. But whenever I played in survival, I would never just take a functional box and make it so that I'm done. Part of the survival concept for me is to put a story behind it, put a building that basically represents that story, and give a little bit more meaning. One of these things would be like the garden farm I built on the Minecraft server like 3 years ago, which was like encased in a large like ziggurat and pyramids basically structure that looked like an ancient civilization, like the hanging gardens of Babylon. And there were interesting challenges there. For example, I wanted to incorporate water as the aesthetic aspect, but also I knew that it's a garden farm, so it shouldn't have any like basically streams of certain lengths, because then like in certain places, because guardians will start to spawn. Or so this also even if you're working aesthetically around a particular technical build, it's also important to also know like what are the constraints of that technical build and try to fit the aesthetic build around it. Like if you have a hostile mob farm, you know that you cannot have any open top level surfaces for blocks, because then suddenly mobs can spawn there. So you have to have everything like either carpeted or put some blocks or tops, or using bottom slabs, for example. But that adds an extra interesting requirement for the build.
I was just thinking about the hostile mob farms because I found that challenging myself when you want to build it out and add some things and you're like, oh man, wait a minute, this all has to be stairs or slabs or carpets or something in order to not mess up all the hard work I did for the rates. Do you ever do anything that's like modular so that it can be rearranged and fit into different spaces? Like if you wanted to put something inside of a castle or a wall, it might be better if it was long and thin or tall and skinny, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I think any of the crop farms is something that typically the unit in that crop farm is very small. It's typically a place where a crop can grow, plus maybe a piston to push it out.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about like a sugarcane farm or like bamboo farms, but then how you put it together and what shape is your building, it doesn't really matter. So there's a lot of flexibility where you can excel in like trying to squeeze all of that in. Another thing that I really want to get into at some point is if you think about iron farms. Iron farms is now something where you have those individual cells of 3 villagers working together, because 3 villagers are required to have an iron golem spawning. But then many of the iron farms use multiple of those villages, cells. And if you look at like a particular tutorial, they give you like the optimal spacing, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Which means that your farm will be very geometric and like very like rigid grid of those cells. And while it is true that this is like the minimum required distance between them, for example, it means that you can actually extend them, and maybe you can build like a custom village where you have those little like houses, that each house is its own like a small module of a iron farm. And I had an idea of like this kind of like a train track that goes in between those houses, and then you have iron golem spawning in each one of them. So maybe it's not an optimal layout, and maybe you can make it faster, but it doesn't really matter that much. You can build like a custom houses in like not really grid like structure, more like organically following the terrain, for example, but still basically satisfying all those basic requirements for an iron farm cell that allow all of them to work together to form like a bigger iron farm. And that's where like a cross between like a technical knowledge and then the creative aesthetic builds is really where it really looks really nice. One person that definitely excels at that, and we all know I think about it, is Etho. Etho's been always very technical player, but also he's able to put a lot of purpose in his builds.
Yeah. Etho's one of those people who I always watch for an example of somebody who's still learning about the game, even though he's been playing it for so long. Like his Let's Play goes back to, alpha versions of the game and so forth, but he's still talks in his videos about, I'm learning about color theory so I can compose builds better. I'm trying different stuff with shapes, and working in mechanics in an aesthetic way is such a great example of what he does. It's really fascinating to watch.
Yeah. Another example I think recently it's quite interesting is the latest playthrough of Minecraft by Captain Sparkles. Captain Sparkles have recently announced that he'll be leaving the mainstream of Minecraft, but he's still putting up the last vanilla playthrough. And while he's doing that in hardcore, you can see that he's very confident in how he plays. Very confident in basically going through the game, even if it's in a hardcore mode where you can make a single mistake and be gone. he really goes through all of these aspects without anything really that resembles anything dangerous. It actually shows how the game can be played casually, even on the highest setting.
So, Jonny, what have you been up to this week in Minecraft?
I am, to be honest, procrastinating on starting my floating island build, which is, for Nmon's benefit, something I discussed in the previous episode, where I've taken some concept art from an artist called Greg Fromenteau. It's a really cool floating island, but with a shipwreck of a large galleon built on it, and it is unclear from his art whether the ship is actually flying the island or whether it's a ship that has crashed on the island somehow. But Greg's art is always grounded in one or two natural feeling details, but then with the supernatural around them. There are whales flying around the mast of the ship in the air, and there is just some really nice compositional elements that I loved. So I'm in the process of drafting that into a build for my survival world, but I can't really commit long hours to it right now because we have some family staying over and using my room as the guest bedroom, so I can't use my office at the hours that I normally prefer to. So in the meantime, I have been streaming a little bit. I've been doing some end raiding to get a few more shulker boxes. I've also been irritated by shulkers levitating me a whole bunch. In a recent attempt at an end raid, I completely forgot to bring arrows. I think I must have just tucked arrows in a chest before I left and just, removed everything from my inventory, and that included any ammunition. So I had a really hard time dealing with the shulkers in those towers and had to dip back to the overworld to get some arrows, because just blocking with a shield the entire time was not working for me. But the other thing I did this week on stream was play a bit more Minecraft Bingo, which I've talked about on the show before. It now has a very useful landing page at playminecraftbingo.com, which shows the history of the game, the original Logon 111 map, and Neun Einser is the sort of latest successor in the series, sort of like how people carried on Skyblock and continued to develop that as a game mode. Neun Einser has been working on a version which is consistently updated to the latest versions of the game, and has now introduced a blind bingo card mode, so you can start the game having played a few rounds, having gotten familiar with the format and the types of items you'll need, and the bingo card is completely blank. And so what you do is you go around collecting items that you think might be on it, and they'll pop up if they are on the card, and those will lock in, but you have to find 25 items, and you don't know what any of them are at the beginning. And that's a cool game mode for multiplayer servers, especially because it allows players to compete, and once one team discovers that an item is on the bingo card, the other team has more information and they can go and grab it. But in single player, it's effectively a test of your knowledge within a test of your knowledge, in a sense, because Minecraft Bingo is great for finding those obscure items and finding basically a shortcut to the fastest way to obtain something. But in that, it's now a test of how well do I remember which items might be required. Do I go after glow ink because it could be part of either a glow item frame or just the glow ink item on its own? When I acquire squid ink from regular squids, that could then break down into black dye, or it could be a book and quill, or it could be some grey dye that I have to get white to combine with. And it was really fun trying this out. I eventually completed a card, and it took me over an hour and a half. But what I learned in the process of that was that inventory management was way more important than it was in a regular bingo run, where I could just throw stuff out of my inventory once I knew I didn't need it anymore. At that point, it could have been that several of those items were still necessary. So it was a really fun way of testing my skills, and a good way to spend a couple of hours if you feel like blowing off some steam in Minecraft but not committing to any large-scale projects.
I haven't yet tried Minecraft Bingo. I know there's been some community events, within ours and within my community as well. And I've certainly tuned into you when you've been playing, and I think Slice Lime as well.
Yes.
And I find it interesting, but I'm also a lot of times when I run into it online, it feels like a speed run. Like there's that kind of trying to beat the clock. How quickly can you complete a bingo card? And I think for me, I'd have to set a goal like, I need to complete the bingo card before my stream is over.
Yes.
not in 33 minutes and 5 seconds, or whatever the current, target is. Because I am embarrassingly out of touch with early game Minecraft. Like it's been so long since I've done any new world stuff. And I know that it would take me a really long time to remember how to do things. You know, like I'm very often like even asking my chat for like recipes for things that I probably should know as someone that does a Minecraft podcast, but I'm just like, I haven't crafted one of these in 3 years. Like, how do I do it again? You know?
Yeah, and like which tools can I make with this? Like, you know, can I just make a wooden hoe if I don't need a full netherite one? Yeah, there is some stuff that comes up during Minecraft Bingo runs that you just don't interact with if you play survival the way you and I do, Joel. Like, I think we are neither of us that interested in killing rabbits as part of the gameplay progression. At the moment, rabbit hide is not useful for any particular recipes other than crafting more leather, and we all have buckets of leather from cow farms. And so rabbit hide and occasionally rabbit meat being on the Minecraft Bingo card in 9.9's version means that you can, you know, you interact with those items in a way that you don't. They become objectives in a way that they are not typically in a survival playthrough.
Nmon, have you done any Minecraft Bingo run-throughs?
Not not myself, but I've seen other people play it. It's definitely an interesting game mode or a mini game that I would love to try, but didn't have a chance. Maybe I should now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm surprised Sliced Lime doesn't have the whole office playing it at this point because, both he, I, and another streamer from Uruguay called Bruno Dan UI, we sort of have this three-way rivalry going on a little bit. I mean, it's mostly me and Bruno. I don't think Sliced really gets into it that hard, but me and Bruno will send each other our personal best times, and we kind of go back and forth on it quite a lot. So it's fun to do. It's a fun test of your knowledge in a way that feels very different to typical survival.
Yep. I used to like watching it, like on like YouTube. Like Minecraft is also a really good game that is good to watch people play.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching a lot of players playing Bingo. It was actually also interesting.
What's new with you, Joel? What's new on the Citadel?
Well, I haven't been procrastinating, but I have indeed been easing myself back in. I've been keeping my streams pretty short, kind of in the sub 2 hours, 1 hour 45, 2 hour sort of range, as I am still working on the West Hill Rivers. I'm working behind the scenes on updating some data packs, and I had a list. I did take some time when I got back in, which I highly recommend people doing, which is to take the existing list of stuff that you've been working on that you might have several pages of things that have been completed, and just making a new list with just the incomplete stuff. So instead of an 8-page book, I've got like a 4-page book now in Minecraft of things that I want to complete. And that helped me wrap my head around what was left. And it feels like a lot less than I previously had in my brain, because when you're flipping through an 8-page book, you think, oh man, I still have this huge list, but most of it had check marks. So I am still working on the outside of West Hill. I went through and did a lot of bone meal and seagrass on the riverbeds. Thankfully, all the hard work was done before the holiday, so all the shaping of the rivers and whatnot. But now I'm going through and doing the really fun stuff, which is adding points of interest like small docks, paths, things like, that you want to bring a player down to the riverbank to look at or entice them to explore. And in doing that, the thing that's left on the checklist is when I get down to like a small dock or a little path that goes down to maybe a fishing spot or something in a river, I also want to take a little bit of extra time and decorate the bottom of the river just nearby, add a couple of stones, maybe have a little bit of gravel runoff or something. That kind of stuff is still left. But on the East River, I added a small spruce dock. I try to change these up, but the good news is that they're not very big builds. They're only like 5x7 maybe. And you can change a few things here and there to make sure they each look unique. But then you can also iterate and realize, okay, well, I liked what I did on this one in the north, but I also like some of the features I did on this one in the west. So I'm going to combine those and kind of make kind of a new idea. And I never go into these with a plan. It's one of my favorite things about Minecraft is adding these details where like you kind of walk by an area and go, huh, you know what? A dock would look really good there. Or I'd like to make a path, or I'd like to do some texturing here. And for the longest time, I've had a lot of coarse dirt paths around the area, and I don't texture them until the very end on purpose, because sometimes you need to move it, 2 blocks to the left. And if you spent an hour texturing, well, maybe not an hour, but if you spend some time texturing things and then you have to move them, it feels really, repetitive. So I finally textured the path that's been there for quite a long time, really enjoying the combination of coarse dirt, rooted dirt, and packed mud as a combination. And as I get closer to the riverbank, I've actually been using a little bit of path block as well in there. And I find it really effective combining it with spruce, for, of course, all of my spruce trapdoors and spruce planks for the wharfs. And I've just been having a lot of fun, getting that feeling of finishing up an area that, has been a little bit blank for the last, 4 or 5 weeks on stream. It's nice to check that off and be like, all right, all the foliage is done. I've done a little bit of grass and bushes, and I've made the path the way that I want, and it looks the way that I want from different angles. And so I'm looking forward to doing more of these, because unlike bigger projects like a bridge or a farm or a building, I can generally complete one of these points of interest within a stream, sometimes two, depending on how big they are. And so that always leaves you with a feeling of accomplishment when you're done.
Something about the level of detail you've put into the small dock with the little fishing boat reminds me of one of those, like, you build this in an hour Lego sets. You know what I mean? I think it's just something about you've just got a few simple objects there. You've got one piece that's just part of the scene, like in the boat. It's just sort of flexible. It could go anywhere, but the way, I mean, it's also the fact that you're good at taking screenshots and you know a lot about composition, but something about this looks like the little the photograph that you get on the front of a Lego box that's like little fishing village scene set, and you just have a couple of very simple elements that feel individual. And the fact that you've got a repertoire of those and you can kind of dot those in here and there and just change them up, that's something that takes a lot of experience getting into to building those.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed learning over the course of the 3+ years on this project, is that you just now have this visual library of, at any point in time, if I want to build a little dock or a little barn or a footbridge of any kind, it's kind of fun stuff where, like, maybe you play on a short-term survival server with a bunch of friends for like a month, and you don't have to make dirt bridges. Like, you can pull one of these stone bridges out of your mind and have it look pretty decent, with very minimal, blocks available. And it's kind of a fun artistic flex to kind of have that library of, like, I know how to make one that's like 9x13 or 3x7, or like, I have all this kind of stuff in my brain. And I think the other lesson is leaning into the lack of plan. Like, obviously you plan the city, but then when it comes to these details, you just kind of put them where your gut wants them to go. And I think that can be really freeing after being kind of like confined within the town walls for so long, and the challenges of that space out in the, in the wild when you're doing landscaping. Like, if you don't like the way that hill is, just remove it, or change the angle of the grassy knoll so that it works just the way that you want, or add flowers where you want. And it's very freeing to kind of add those details and really make it, feel like the way that you want it to look in the end.
Nmon, once you've built up a bunch of farms, is your goal with farms to reach a point where you can build whatever you want and you simply have all of the resources of the game available to you? Or do you find the farms are the reason for more aesthetic builds? Do you ever dip into building something that's purely aesthetic, or do you find that your aesthetic builds are mostly centered around hiding farms or decorating farms from the more technical bare bones of them?
I think it's both. I always try to hide them. And I always try to either hide them or put something aesthetic around it, so it's actually part of my base, or part of my area that I'm developing. But also, like, if you want to build a castle, you need resources for it. And if you, for example, want to make one with let's say dark prismarine as roofs, you need to have a garden farm to give you that prismarine. So it's both ways, but typically, once I build all the farms and cover them with aesthetic builds, that's typically all I have time for.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
that's probably where it ends.
Moving on to the news for this week, we have an article on Minecraft.net about Minecraft Legends. In this article announcing the latest Lost Legends challenge map for Minecraft Legends, the team has also announced it will be the final Lost Legends. Quoting the article, "Since launch, we've listened to community feedback and implemented a series of changes and tweaks to make the game better. With that complete, we're now going to take a step back from development. While we won't be releasing any new content, i.e. updates, Lost Legends, or Marketplace DLC for Minecraft Legends, the fun doesn't stop here. We'll continue having a blast playing the game alongside our community because those rowdy piglins are showing no signs of slowing down. Plus, we're leaving you one last freebie, the Bright-Eyed Hero skin, which you can claim now on the Minecraft Legends Marketplace."
So Minecraft Legends launched in April 2023. And now, here in January 2024, 9 months later, we see development ceasing. Its story was not wholly dependent on the same DLC strategy Minecraft Dungeons had, where it felt like the default game, the base game, was a self-contained story, but then obviously as the DLC levels came out, the orb of dominance was shattered and different shards ended up in different biomes, and effectively to complete the story you ended up going through all of the DLC, and finally the end DLC brought the end of the game. I'm not wholly surprised to see Minecraft Legends ending development, both because of, I think, the community reception of the game has been fairly mild, and also because the story didn't have more places to go from here. It felt like once you complete the campaign, that was it. There are a few fun maps to play, but nothing on the scale of rolling out DLC every couple of months the way Minecraft Dungeons did.
I'm also unsurprised that the development stopped. Despite even spending the time, to research for the spawn chunks, I haven't really seen much of Minecraft Legends on any screen, or I certainly haven't been thinking about it. In all of the media that I watched, the YouTube and the Twitch and stuff, I haven't seen Minecraft Legends. I haven't been looking for it specifically, but it just hasn't popped up in my radar,
Yeah. Nmon, have you dipped into Minecraft Legends much? Did you have a great deal of time to step into Legends while you were working on vanilla Minecraft?
I did try it. I played a little bit, but it was not really my style of the game, and I'll talk about it in a moment. But once the game was released, we pretty much knew right away that it didn't really land it as we really were hoping for. So it's not surprised that the lifespan of the game is a little shorter than we expected. On the other hand, like for example, Dungeons was doing really, really well and was actually running for many years, and was actually received way better, and is still a very popular game that resonates with many players. With game development, apart from the core Minecraft, which is on its own a phenomenon, you get more or less success with various ventures like these, and one can do better, one can do a little worse. So I know that the team that was working on the Legends is now focusing on something very different. And we also learned a whole lot about what went right and what didn't go so well. And I hope that definitely will have some positive impact on the future games that Mojang will be working on.
Yeah, it's by no means the team's first, the first experience with this. Thinking back to Minecraft Earth, for example, that was a really innovative idea and a really interesting way to take Minecraft into a different medium, but for various reasons didn't work out. On a technology level, it wasn't ready for a lot of devices. A lot of devices weren't ready for the AR compatibility. Battery life was an issue, and ultimately it came out right before a global pandemic, which shut a lot of people inside. So it was partly just a miscommunication of what was required for the game, and a lot of disappointment as a result of that, and then obviously circumstances well beyond our control. But I think the team learning from this and the team taking positive lessons in that moving forward is a really good sign. Does the vanilla Minecraft learn a lot of lessons from spin-off games like Legends and Dungeons, or does that feel like it has a really strong trajectory of its own and those lessons are more likely to be taken into other spin-off games?
I think vanilla Minecraft is, like, as I said, it's a phenomenon on its own, and we want to keep it this way. Although, like, when the studio is working on other games, lots of that creative work that went into development of, let's say, interesting mobs or interesting mechanics, sometimes we just keep that and we put that into the vanilla game as well. What personally didn't resonate with me with Legends, it was very fast paced, because that was the style of the game that it represented. What I like about Minecraft is that you can always have this idea. You can always step back, and if you are really pinched, you can hide in a 1x1 hole in the wall and just regroup and reorganize your stuff. Try to figure out how to get out of this situation. And this similar was with with Dungeons. You could always move back to the area of the dungeon that you have explored and try to reconstitute yourself if you figure out that the challenge ahead of you is too much, and try to figure out what to do next. So maybe that's why it didn't resonate with me. Maybe that's why it didn't resonate with some of our players. We had some lessons learned, and we'll see where it leads next. Yeah,
that's a really interesting point, though, that I haven't seen expressed elsewhere, is the ability to take a step back and the sense of recovery and almost like regaining peace that you can have in vanilla Minecraft, where Minecraft Legends, as you say, is very focused on pressure, and with it being a competitive game, usually in the player versus player kind of sense, you feel like you always have to be on your toes, and that can be quite stressful, especially for a game franchise that is known for being chill. There are obviously ways you can play which are a lot more intense and put pressure on the player, but Minecraft, even through stuff like the soundtrack and the reputation the game has had as a sandbox game, a lot of it is about taking things at a slower pace. So yeah, that's really insightful. I can see that being something that a lot of players will have felt but didn't necessarily know how to express.
When there is a spin-off game like Minecraft Legends or Minecraft Dungeons, does that happen in isolation from the Minecraft team? I know that you mentioned some of those creative assets and things. You just can keep them around because they're cool. But I mean, with the Minecraft team being so busy, are there any cross-team meetings? Like, do you get brought in to see how things are going on something like Legends or Dungeons?
Definitely. Those are not games that are developed by other studios, or even if they are like developed with help of other studios. Lots of the creative direction comes from us, and so we actually do try to develop them in as one big family. And this also boils down not just to the actual basically creatives and assets and stuff like that in the game, but also the lore behind it. So there are certain elements of the lore in Legends that come from vanilla, and there are potentially some seeds in the Legends and in Dungeons that we planted to refer to in vanilla in some time. So it actually creates this kind of effect of, I've seen it somewhere in some other game, and now it pops up in vanilla. So that's interesting, kind of like a development style, I would say.
It's really cool that it's not done in a silo, because I feel like that, for me, thinking about what it might be like to work on a game like Minecraft, in just like any other long-term project, it would be a fun creative stretch to work on something new or contribute to something new, even if briefly. It's kind of like a nice little coffee break, even if, or when, obviously the developers at Mojang love Minecraft, but when you're that steeped in it, it must be nice to kind of stretch your legs and kind of get some ideas that maybe don't work technically in vanilla Minecraft, but could maybe see fruits of labor happen in another game or another avenue.
Yeah, so with Legends, the idea was that game happened in the times way before what you currently see in vanilla.
Right.
So that's when all the creatures of the overworld were living peacefully together without conflict. So players would live basically among skeletons and among creepers and treat them basically like any other animal or friends, and then they'll basically unite to fight the common foe, which is the Nether. And then there is something in between that went like terribly wrong, that now like creepers and skeletons turn against the players. We don't know what happened, but through Legends we see how it looked like before. So that's part of the lore. We're just basically filling in the lore pieces, and we're just leaving certain things unexplained, so you can build your own story.
I really like the framework of that. It sort of reminds me of what Marvel is doing with their what if animations, and exploring different side scenarios and little facets of the world that could fill out in parallel universes or anything like that. It's super fun. We're going to move on into our listener email segment. So if anybody wants to email the show and potentially get your question read on a future episode, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. We have one question specifically for Nmon, which we'll get into in our main discussion. But first, we thought we'd throw out another scenario and see how a Minecraft developer reacts to this. So this one comes in from Erica with the subject of windowed chests. Hi, Pix and Joel and Nmon. I like the ideas that you discussed in episode 274 and have some thoughts that might make them more Minecrafty. A cardinal rule of Minecraft that every item changes depends on resources. Iron blocks use iron, stripping logs uses X durability, etc. What do you think about the idea of a windowed chest? It could be crafted with a chest and a pane of glass. The resulting chest would have a small window and display the first item from the inventory in the window. That way you get some visibility without introducing a phantom item or tying up a precious item in an item frame. Erica was engulfed by her own chest monster, never to be seen again.
I like the idea of a windowed chest, or a chest with window, as it would probably be named in vanilla Minecraft. It sounds like a straightforward way to display a hint as to the contents of the chest from the outside. I imagine players would use it in a similar way as they might use item frames now in the game, with the item that's in the frame giving you kind of like a theme or a hint or a color organization as to what might be in this row of chests or this individual chest. I'm also really excited to have Nmon on the show to talk about this, because something that I lack is the behind the scenes knowledge of like entities and how difficult this would be technically. It might sound like a great idea for the players out there, but I'm wondering what hurdles it might have, in terms of actually, is it a good idea? Can it be implemented in the game? So Nmon, what do you think of a chest with a window in it?
Yeah, I personally feel little on the fence with that, mostly due to the game balancing concerns, because like what that would make a regular chest better about. So when coming up with features, you have to not just think about what that feature brings new to the game, but also what that feature potentially takes away from the existing features, and how does it, and can players create their own situations where they can basically make a similar functionality. As you mentioned, you can use an item frame with an item on it, and then basically put it on the side of the chest with similar effect. Another consideration here would be performance. So basically something that you would always need to render that item on top of the chest behind some window. It'll probably work perfect if you only have 1 or 2 or 5 of them, but if you build like a giant storage system, it'll tank your frames significantly, comparing it to let's say using regular chests. Like, we do have blocks that have similar functionality for very specific use cases. For example, the chisel bookshelves. You can only use it to store books, and you can only store way less books than you would normally be able to store like in a chest. But you can use that to actually display where the books are, so you can pick individual books as well. So it's a very thin balancing act. Like, the idea sounds good on the surface and probably would work like in a modded setting, but like in the vanilla game, you need to think like, do we really need that? And like, one of the good example of it, of something that I know that there is a common sentiment in the design group of Minecraft, is the existence of beds. Is something that's basically a single block that represents a bed. It means that every bed in every build that you would see typically is the same bed. And if we didn't have beds as blocks, players would basically try to make a bed using combinations of like various walls and carpets and trapdoors and maybe fences. So adding some blocks that have very specific use case oftentimes decrease the creativity what players can do with the game. So it is actually a little bit dangerous, I think. So, but that's just my opinion. Other people can have a different opinion, and that's the beauty of the game.
Yeah, it's interesting you compare this to the way modded Minecraft handles storage, because I think in a lot of storage mods you often find displaying items takes priority. And so a lot of the time this feels like the kind of thing players have seen solved over and over again and wonder why there isn't a solution for it in vanilla Minecraft. And the answer so often is to create your own solution with the tools that you're given. And going back to your example of beds effectively being a one-block solution for that, where more creativity could come out of not having bed blocks in the game, you find players rejecting item frames in favor of something that I do with my storage system, placing blocks in the floor to label them instead. Or now you have way more options with signs and glow ink and the different color dyes, and you can dye text on different sides of signs even, so that you have more options there. I think one of the great strengths of recently developed features in Minecraft is that they are so considered as to have multiple uses and not be so specific in their either functionality or in their aesthetic. There is obviously some stuff that's happening that you can't really use any other way, like wolf armor, for example. We'll get onto that more in a second, but wolf armor at the moment is just a one-use item, similar to horse armor in that way. But I've seen people in the past use horse armor as a model, which if you invert it, it looks a little bit more like a futuristic like laser gun or something, and then players in PvP arena games will use those as though they are weapons, and they'll code some stuff in to use vanilla textures and vanilla items, but give them different functionality. So there is example of creativity that can be taken out of even something that feels really pigeonholed into a single use.
So for the main discussion this week, obviously, both Jonny and I are excited to talk to Nmon about his history with Minecraft. And for those of you that are not up to speed, from a Minecraft-focused YouTube channel that launched in the summer of 2015 to now joining Mojang in 2021, Nmon has gained a reputation as a highly respected technical player, creator of Carpet Mod, and now a developer on vanilla Minecraft. We'd like to discuss what brought you into Minecraft, your exploration of the technical side of the game, and your new role as you've joined Mojang, as well as, features that you've worked on within the game. But to start at the top, we have that other email that came in from Dylan A. What's in a Gnembon? Hello, gentlemen. I was so excited to hear that the one and only Gnembon would be joining the Spawn Chunks for an episode. I'm sure Pix and Joel will cover lots of great Minecraft questions. Gnembon, what does your username mean? What is its backstory? How did you choose it? Thanks, Dylan A. So Gnembon, I'm just as curious as to how you chose your online handle.
Oh, the story is like less exciting than it seems like. Basically, when I was way younger, I needed to use some IGN, some nickname in a game, and this was basically a character from a novel that I was reading at that time for my school, and I was like, this is like a cool character. Let me use that name, and that's what stick. And then from game to game, I was like, what should I use now for an IGN? I just use Gnembon, and basically there is no particular reason why I chose this one. It probably if I would read a different book at that time, or was surrounded by different characters, or maybe when I'm watching some other movies at that time, I would choose a different name. But I just stuck to it. I just kept using it from game to game until I stumbled upon Minecraft, and I chose that as my player IGN, and that's. Yeah, so that's essentially the backstory. Nothing like super crazy, but something that I've been using since I was very little.
It's amazing how those things stick with you, right? Like the references from your childhood or your younger days that can really stick with you. And in my case, having to effectively invent my username from scratch when I started my YouTube channel, it was sort of based on previous projects I'd done before and a desire for pixel art to show up in the games a bit more. But yeah, it must be, in a way, kind of affirming to have this identity that you've carried through your entire creative life and see, your early interest in games and everything all taken from one place and then taking you all the way to working on one of your favorite games. Must be kind of satisfying.
Yeah, and it's actually interesting, like possibly if you try to search for my nickname on the internet, you'll be able to find some of my previous ventures in other areas that's not Minecraft, but it's never connected to who am I as a person, which I think is really interesting. Like what I do personal, in my real life, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really go in line with what Gnembon is doing on the internet, and I feel it great. I mean, in the sense that now I know that now we know that I live in Sweden because I work for Mojang, but where I lived before, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't it's not that important. Or what did they do before? It doesn't matter. Yeah.
I think there's an interesting lesson in there too, in that, when you are choosing a username to do something on the internet, whether it's streaming on Twitch or making YouTube videos or just logging in with friends to play, an online game, when you choose a handle, you never know if that's something that's going to end up being with you for a very long time. And so, choosing a name of a favorite character from a book or a song, or maybe your a spin on your favorite artist or something, is something that's personal to you, doesn't necessarily lead back to you in terms of your personal life, but then also because it's a name that was from another medium, it's not, followed by 11 numbers and hashtags, and it's not, a meme, or it's not meant to be jokey. And I think that there's some young people out there, when they choose usernames, they just kind of throw caution to the wind and do whatever they think is funny at the time. And I am uniquely outside of that. I've used my real name across all platforms that I'm on, but that was a choice that I made, and I'm fine with it. And as a young artist, it was beneficial to me for people to say, like, oh yeah, I saw him do artwork on this live stream. How do I find him? Well, he was using his real name. So you Google me and I'm pretty easy to track down. But I think that it's an interesting way that, like my Xbox handle, or my I think my Steam name is still a very old animation company that I started in my early 20s, and like I can't change it because the Steam doesn't let you change it. And like, had I thought about it at the time, I would have much preferred to have my Steam name as just my name. I don't know why I chose that name, but it's one of those things that some things you just can't change. So it's an interesting lesson, when you think about these names that you never know. Like, you just 1 minute you're playing Minecraft and making cool technical videos on YouTube, and fast forward to 7 years later and you're working at Mojang, and that name, gets listed, when you're interviewed for developer, videos, it gets posted underneath your face, when you're being interviewed. I think that's really cool that it's something that you've kind of made your own, and brought forward.
I'm always worried about the future of Ninja's career when he inevitably gets called up to be a martial artist, and is going to struggle with some of that, maybe.
Yeah, I like always remember, I think Iskal85, he used a different nickname before when he was creating his YouTube account, and his YouTube account link still is based on his previous nickname that he was using. It has nothing to do with his name. It has nothing to do with Iskal. But I remember him answering questions. What does this name? I think it's Al Victor has to do with Iskal. And he said just nothing. It's just his previous name that he was using that he decided to rebrand, and because of how YouTube links work, you can't change it. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's the Hermitcraft Recap channel. Started off as a separate channel that we ran for the Foolcraft Recap when Iskal was doing that series with a bunch of friends, and so at the time, Hermitcraft Recap was made on a separate channel that was owned by the Hermits, and eventually we kind of had a discussion about our own ownership of the channel and split off into the channel that we already had full control over, and so the URL where the majority of Hermitcraft Recap has found its success still remains Foolcraft Recap. So we have to be quite careful when we give out the URL to point people directly through a link that doesn't necessarily have Foolcraft Recap in it, so they don't get the wrong idea.
So Nmon, going back to the start of your Minecraft career, do you remember your first impressions of Minecraft? Do you remember your first session in the game?
I do. It was actually, I very rarely get into the games, in the sense that I spend a very long time on them. But when I do, I basically know right away that there is something special about this game. So when I was very little, I did play a lot of Heroes of Might and Magic games. Then I had a little break, and then when a friend of mine told me about Minecraft, I was like, I can give it a shot. I can give it a try, and I opened the game. I didn't know really what to do. As we just said, the game doesn't really explain how this works. I found some tutorials on the internet how to change game modes. I didn't know what game modes are. I was surprised that hostile mobs are not interested in me anymore. blocks are not popping out when I break them, and I would just switch to creative. I didn't know that I did that. I didn't know what creative is. I didn't know what survival is. Then I started to like create simple like roller coasters, and I was like, this game is really interesting, where you can build from blocks entire setups like Lego for like Legos for computer. But then when I realized, then I watched a few playthroughs on YouTube, which were quite popular at the time. How to survive and thrive your first night. I basically realized, okay, now that's how you play it. And then I opened the game, started the seed, and one of my first impressions of the game were basically terrifying squids. I thought from day one that squids are hostile mobs, because when they open their tentacles, you have a big mouth there. And I thought those are jaws that will bite you. And I remember maybe I like suffocated underwater, or basically drowned. Maybe that's why I took damage. But I thought those were actually connected to those squids that trying to eat me. And I was and I was at the beginning trying to really avoid rivers, because I thought this is where the biggest terrifying creatures are, and the only safe place is on the land. And then at the end, like when I realized that squids are like the most peaceful and the most passive mobs, really, that just go about their life and don't do anything to the player, I was like, okay, that was a bad judgment. But that's what like the artwork of like this open jaw, it was like basically created that false impression on me. And I still have that in my mind. I still laugh about it. I think this was interesting, and that kept me in. So I guess this worked out.
And you laugh about it now as you farm them for millions of ink sacs to go along with your Guardian farm, right? That's the
Exactly.
We've already heard the end of this story at the top of the episode. Is that you're now punishing squids for scaring you so badly the first time?
Yeah, but if you take a look at its texture and in its animation, I wouldn't blame a younger me to basically judge incorrectly that this might be a scary mob.
Oh, absolutely. I'm right there with you. It is terrifying the first couple of times you encounter them, but then I always realize that they're swimming away from me, and if they swim towards you, then they have to swim kind of head first, so maybe, you get a slightly different impression, but I can imagine not wanting to spend time around them for too long.
I could see that connection as well, because the only other thing in the game that has multiple legs like that is a spider, and they're kind of like spiders of the sea. I can see that, anybody that has like arachnophobia, I can see them maybe not being afraid of octopus and squid, but also being like a little irked out. Like, that's more legs than I'm comfortable with. I can see that being something that people might come to a conclusion on, right?
Anybody who's seen those old like creature feature B movies like Deep Rising or whatever, where there's like the villain is a sea monster that drowns a cruise ship or whatever, you can make those connections.
So once you got over your fear of squids, what brought you into the more technical side of the game?
I think it was because of basically once I started playing the game, I also realized that the game is also interesting to be played as a backseat game. In a sense, in the newer setting where basically you would basically watch people on the YouTube play it. It's basically like the modern approach to basically backseat gaming. And I've seen like players like Zizuma Void and Etho play it, and they were making certain contraptions and decisions, and I also played the game myself, and I was like, but you can do it better, you can do it a little bit like I figured out that it's not true that you can actually get that done in a better way. And I was like, the only way really to convey it was to figure out how to record the game and also put it on YouTube, and basically maybe try to message those people, or just basically try to send the message that maybe this is the better way to do it. I think one of my first videos was about how to set up better like a grid of TNTs to basically blow up an area. That was like a response to me watching somebody else doing it according to my gut feeling, not in the best way. and then another was a sand conversion farm. Basically, back in the days, you could convert one color of sand into another color of sand, like yellow to red, using some very weird and bug. And I think Panda, who is now on the Mojang team as well, he basically had a stream and he experimented with that, and I came up with my mind how to do it in a simpler way, and I made a little video about it. And I think that's how it started, basically trying to share with other people how to solve things in the game, like basically treating this as like a puzzle game, where each technical challenge is its own puzzle.
I really like that approach came from an education standpoint, like not a you're doing it wrong. It's a, oh, that's interesting. I think I might be able to hone that. I might be able to craft that into either a more concise way or explain how it's working and provide an alternative, perhaps better for your situation way to do it. I like that approach so much better than what you often see, which is like in the YouTube comments of like, you're doing it wrong. And I think that's a really cool way. And it's really interesting that your pull into technical Minecraft was creating content. So not just, for your own satisfactory of crunching numbers and going through that, the inside of the game, but like sharing it was a drive to get you more into the technical side.
Yeah. And then going into like, then further mods and more technical aspects was basically I realized that the game really is an open source in the sense that you can have, when you're modding it, you also have access to the source code. So if you are trying to research some very, very weird behaviors and like basically cross behaviors between different blocks and entities, in order to get like the gold truth, you can basically go into the game and try to read it. And then not many people are able to do that. But then I think my role and my kind of like the vision of what I'm supposed to do is when I learn something, I should just very quickly share it with other people so they can have that knowledge even if they are not able to like read the source code of the game. So that's basically what I really wanted to do back in the days. And that also brought me into modding, because once you are into source code reading and basically game analysis from this angle, you basically quickly realize that with a few tweaks you can actually make the game better, or the game better according to your particular needs. And then you basically start releasing that as a mod. So that's how it started.
Was that something you had experience in before, game development, or was Minecraft really the first game that encouraged you to step into learning what the code meant and understanding it on that level?
From the game development perspective, yes, this was my first basically foray into game development. Obviously, I do have a programming background, and that was not the problem, but that actually taught me quite a bit of like how to design a game and how Minecraft is designed.
And so that really feels like an origin story for what you're known for outside of your YouTube channel and working for Mojang now, which is carpet mod. And I think it's really interesting that you've outlined this desire for the gold truth, as you put it, like the utmost understanding of how everything functions and how efficient things are. It's something that I have often wondered about my real life. Like, if I could know exactly how many pens I have used over the course of my life, if there was something like the Minecraft statistics page for real life, that would be absolutely fascinating. But you've gone beyond what Minecraft's statistics can really give you, or at least can give you in terms of they'll show you what the player does, but not what the farms do. And so what was the path to deciding, hey, what I really need is something that can track the output of farms? Like, at what point did that start to become the roadblock that you realized you needed to go through?
Yeah, in many cases that was actually for the presentation for the YouTube content, because like I can try to understand a particular mechanic myself, and I can read into it, and I can explain to myself clearly how things work, and I can use it as I learn it. But then when I need to present it to other people, it's better to have some visuals on the screen and to show exactly what's going on. And then for that, you realize that maybe I need some extra tools, like to draw things on this in the game, or maybe I need some extra tools to actually measure things to show, yes, like be in between these two approaches, this one is better, not because I know it should be better, but here are the numbers, here is the proof that this approach, like for example, causes the game to like trigger certain behavior more often. And I think that's where building of the mods that support that discovery started.
So with Carpet Mod being something that you created to help communicate the video and content that you were making, what's the backstory of going from that point to becoming a part of the Mojang team and working on Minecraft?
I mean, in the sense that of being part of the SciCraft crew, we were invited in 2019, I believe, to Nashville in Tennessee for Minecon, and that's where also we met the developers. The developers met us. We knew each other from like the Discords and from YouTube, from various like content places, but this was like the first place where we could actually see each other in face and basically be able to chat about the game. So that's basically where that connection started. And because I was basically looking into like the game mechanics, how it all works out together, basically that's what game developers are into, and that's what interests them as well. So we kind of share the common knowledge, share the common language between us. So that's actually something that I think we resonated quite well.
It's great when you make those connections early, and you kind of think, well, this could just be like a solid friendship, or it could lead to like more opportunities. And then the fact that you then get to go and work on the game is fantastic. I mean, let's chat about some of your work, and in particular the latest additions that we've seen to the game in snapshots and betas, which are the Armadillo and Wolf armor. Like, I was pretty surprised to learn that you worked on these features directly, and I think it'll probably surprise a few of our listeners as well, because what you are known for is the technical side of things, the under the hood statistics, and more kind of block-based stuff. And so I wanted to really kind of pick your brain about the Armadillo and Wolf armor, starting with, were you and your colleagues on the development team, were you surprised that the Armadillo won the 2023 mob vote? I've read Xylephian's blog, which is like a personal side thing and not any kind of official source, but he said that a lot of people on the team were expecting either the penguin wins because it's cute, or the crab wins because the functionality might be useful to people. So were you surprised the Armadillo won?
At first, maybe yes, but very quickly, like if you'd observe the polls, it was quite apparent that wolf armor is something that really resonates with a lot of players, of different players' play styles, that really like the having a pet aspect in the game, but this was not really that fulfilled. And in this year's mob vote, those three options that players had, they were basically an animal plus some basically trait attached to it. And among those three options, we know that for the Armadillo, the trait part was like the biggest aspect, not the Armadillo itself. So it was not a surprise to me that Armadillo won. That's essentially it. We knew that that pairing it with the wolf armor would make a very strong candidate for a lot of players.
Yeah, and it's something that I think we are getting more emails and you know questions here on the show related to the wolf armor side than the Armadillo side. So I think those instincts are proving very well founded. So once the Armadillo wins the 2023 mob vote, one thing I'm really curious about from your side of things is, how does the development team take ownership of new features? Like, a lot of these are going to have been generated beforehand. The community is given three options, but then do you call dibs on working on the Armadillo? Is it assigned to you by your department lead? Do you just kind of have a big discussion about it? And how collaborative is that process once you start working on those features directly?
So to some extent, yes, you can say that I'm interested in working in this feature and I'm maybe not interested in working in that feature. And if there's enough people that agree together that what they really like prefer to work on, then there is no problems in like taking like one person taking one aspect, another taking basically something else. One thing that is important to note is that there are two distinct development groups in Mojang gameplay. One is working on the current update, the big update for the year, and the other group is like working on like external things that are around it. And often those like groups intertwine. So I worked on the Summer 23, which was the Tales and Trails update. And naturally, the team that worked on pre-live to work on the features that we would announce and also share immediately after live were basically focusing on that while we finished the development on the Tales and Trails. So now the team that is focusing on the Summer 24 update they are focusing on that, while things like a mob vote is put on that now smaller team, which is responsible for all the additional content. For example, the changes to the changes and improvements to the decorated pot that you can use it as a container, or the bat rework, the basically bat remodel was something that we've done in that smaller development group. And that's also something that we got tasked with, which is the Armadillo and Wolf Armor, or the mob vote winner. And basically that's what I'm working on right now. And also that's why this is not part of the Summer 24 update. So it's basically with something that came to surprise to some people, because on Bedrock it was released under its own development toggle, and because on Bedrock you have releases almost every month, while on Java our next minor release will actually contain the Armadillo and Wolf Armor, which is later in the year, but it's like now straight in main, so we don't have to enable any toggles to actually have armadillos, which is an indication that this is not part of the big update that will actually come earlier.
Yeah, and it makes sense for you working on those as two separate departments, but yeah, from a player perspective, I was certainly surprised that it wasn't behind the experimental toggle. At first I thought there'd been some kind of mistake, but then realizing that the team is now committed to developing little tweaks to additional features and minor features like that for these minor decimal point updates, it doesn't need to be something that comes up in 1.21, and the Armadillo and Wolf Armor only really affect things that are already in the game, like wolves. So I think it's a very smart approach to development, especially if it means you can put this thing in the player's hands a little bit earlier and work with the community on different iterations of it, which is what you're doing right now. Considering that you're known for focusing on more technical aspects of the game, is it a challenge for you to code something like the Armadillo and Wolf Armor? I mean, to the player, obviously, these feel very different to blocks and dispenser interactions and things like that, but do they feel different to code to you, or is this absolutely in your wheelhouse?
This is something that you learn. It's not that very difficult, and different mob behaviors and mobs themselves didn't interest me that much before. As you said, I was more into like blocks and how blocks react to each other. But mobs works as fine. I mean, I don't see any big challenges basically for that. It is pretty interesting work to work on the mobs as well.
And so the challenge comes from getting it to a place where the community is happy with it, right? Which I expect is a more abstract challenge than something you can handle just by fine-tuning the code. So is there anything left to try with the Armadillo and Wolf Armor? Are you happy with where it is right now, or is the team still kind of workshopping some stuff? Is there anything about that you can tell us?
Yes, so something that we've done differently this year, comparing to, for example, the previous years with previous mobs that we released, is we basically wanted to share our work way earlier in the development process than before. If you, for example, look at the Sniffer was worked on for like about half a year and was basically released in the snapshots when it was pretty much done. And if you learn a little bit about the development process for games and like the certification that we have to go through for Xbox, and also like there are dependencies that we have to follow through with things like merchandise departments, and like all those like little like plushies of the mobs, they need to be made on time and they need to be designed and made on time for the for when the mobs are out.
They need to know which side of the face the armadillo's eyes are going on so they can turn it into a plushie, right?
Exactly. So all of that needs to be finalized pretty early in the development process. And with things like Sniffer, it was kind of developed behind the curtains, and then it was basically revealed to the public. And any feedback that was taken, really, we couldn't apply it right away without any like extra hurdles. So with Armadillo and Wolf Armor, basically one of our takes was that, first of all, show the community that we can actually develop mobs and mob-related features quickly. So the voting was done in October, and 2 months after, there was the first snapshot where Armadillo and Wolf Armor was like released. It was also released in a kind of like a very bare form. So Armadillo is essentially an animal that spawns in savannas, exactly that was shown. And basically you can obtain scutes from them, and you can craft those scutes into wolf armor, and you can put that wolf armor similarly to horse armor on your pet, and that gives a little bit more armor to it. And that's it. And that's it for now. We actually intending to work on it more. Here, what the community's opinions are, like where that development they feel is lacking, where the development should go, and because of that, we are able to actually adapt. And because we do it early on, we can change the design as much as we want right now, and basically direct the feature where we want it to go, like where people actually that our players want it to go. For example, now we know that in terms of like how much you care for Armadillo versus Wolf Armor, we know that the split is roughly 20-30% towards Armadillo and 70% towards Wolf Armor, which means that we treat both features as equally important, but we know that we should spend more time on making the Wolf Armor as best as we can make, comparing to making Armadillo as interesting mob as Armadillo can be. Yeah?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's putting the community's chief interests at the forefront of developing these features, right? And yeah, I absolutely agree. It seems like the community was much more excited about wolf armor than they were about the mob, but there are still going to be those people who love armadillos. They're part of, maybe they're from somewhere like Texas where armadillos are relatively common, and they'll consider them part of the landscape around them, so it feels like something they can identify with more in-game if mobs from, animals from their local ecosystem are present in Minecraft. But then the majority of people are going to be thinking, well, one, how can my dog die less? And secondly, how can I make my dog look pretty? So is there going to be more work with the art team there on like the aesthetics of wolf armor? Can you say much about that, or is that still something you're kind of working on behind the scenes?
We are still working on how to do it, or what would be the best way to do it, but we know that both the aesthetics of the wolf armor and as well as the functionality of it, like how it should work, are two very important things that lots of players really care about. If you think about going with your pet for an adventure, a player has this advantage that when a player dies, a player responds. So you can pretty much get your stuff together, go back where you ended up, and then basically try to reclaim your things and continue from where you left off. With wolves and dogs that are meant to be as well as combat creatures, you currently don't have that chance. Like if a wolf dies, it dies. So we have to figure out how to make it a comparable experience, in the sense that not only your wolf will be stronger, but also if you are in a pickle, players would probably likely die themselves rather than let their wolf die. And you want to make sure that maybe if you make some mistakes early on, is not as punishing for your pet.
Yeah, and that's something I kind of put together in my latest episode about the snapshots and where I featured wolf armor. And I had a fun time using a wolf in combat for the first time in a long time, and was able to kind of observe its behavior and figure out what felt still missing about it. And you touched on the main thing, which is that, yeah, wolves don't respawn and the player does, and hostile mobs are respawning infinitely around you, so sooner or later the wolf is going to be put under enough pressure that it becomes a risk. But also, players are still so attached to dogs in the real world that they aren't willing to see wolves as a disposable resource in the way they might see other things. And so that's not necessarily a mindset that modern Minecraft wants to promote. Like, you're not trying to make wolves more disposable. You're going the other way. You're trying to make them feel more like stalwart companions that can stay with you and not suffer the same risks while still keeping them balanced. And it must be a really difficult line to walk.
Yeah, and that's where I think community feedback early on is very important to us. So we observe like what player suggestions are and what players think that the armor should help them with, which will be able to like focus us in areas where players really need the wolf armor to go, as well as armadillos themselves. Like it's a cute animal, yes, it checks that box right now. But maybe what are the other interesting mechanics that we can introduce to make them more unique? And we have a few ideas. I think we will be starting the snapshot series very soon. I think this Wednesday is the first one that we are planning for. We'll see how this goes. But there might be some surprises for Armadillo lovers.
I'm very excited to hear that. That's really cool. And like you said, given that these are still early in their development, it's sort of unusual for players to have this much still to anticipate with a feature like that. So that's really cool. So many of our listeners probably expected you to be here talking about the Crafter and the recent addition of the Tick command, because they're fairly similar to pre-existing carpet mod features. So I imagine, hopefully those listeners are still with us. They're wondering why we've been talking about the Armadillo for so long. But I was wondering if you could give us some insight into what role you played in bringing these features to vanilla Minecraft. Were they something that you pitched to the team? Did the team approach you when you joined for a more vanilla implementation, or were these features mostly worked on by other developers?
So it depends which feature you ask for, because for the crafter, when I joined, it became apparent that the entire team was having discussions about how the automatic crafting should be done in the game. So this was not a new concept, and however, I'm hoping that some of my work that I've done through mod development had some influence, definitely on those prototypes that were basically floating around the office. And also, like, the team that was working on the actual implementation for the summer 24, we chatted quite a bit about like the details, or what do you think like this should behave like to have like a good block that is very flexible towards like the technical players and allow a lot more creativity through automation, but also is easy to use for players that don't have those technical skills but want to use on the basic aspects of it. That's why we came up with the idea of like toggleable slots. So if you want like to only do basic recipes that follows in a shape, as long as you find a way to deliver ingredients in the correct order, you should be able to automatically craft it. But for players that want to use them in a very flexible way and very customizable from the automation part of things, they can still use the entirety of the crafting grid and figure out the way how to add and remove items from it using some filters. So it's a mix. It's a block that I think is very well designed in terms of like the power that it gives to very advanced players, but also is approachable for players that just started with Redstone and figure stuff out as they go.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the biggest surprise for people, is that first of all, discussion about automatic crafting were happening prior to when you joined in 2021, and also that this wasn't just something that you said, I come in with this idea, I'm bringing you the crafter, and that, like, you know, the crafter is not solely down to something that you'd already developed in Carpet Mod. So let's talk about the tick command then. When vanilla tick was implemented, you posted an explanation on your GitHub page. We'll have that linked in our show notes if anybody wants to read that, of how it differed from Carpet's tick. And there were obviously some compromises there. You've outlined them very clearly. Can you give us an insight into why vanilla Minecraft can't adopt all the features of a pretty successful mod like Carpet? And as the mod author, do you feel like the vanilla implementation is nerfed, or is it streamlined? And how do you feel about the differences between the vanilla implementation and your original modded implementation?
Yeah, so tick command is something that's is in stark opposition to the crafter. This was entirely done by me, by basically internal agreement that yes, we actually want to have that functionality and that power, not just for ourselves, for internal development of the game, but also for other people to use without the need of mods. And that's something that I worked myself, and that actually also shows, as you mentioned, that's actually a very good example of the difference between the development of a mod as a mod and the development of something that actually goes into the game and is shipped to all the players. So the implementation that we have currently in vanilla, I would say it's more streamlined version. It's a little bit cut down from what Carpet Mod had, because Carpet Mod had some features that are, I would use the word junky, but functional. And with implementation that goes up with the rest of the command system and commands in the game, you want something that's absolutely solid, rock solid. Also, when you are developing a mod, you typically, first of all, care only about your own group of players that are basically using it. You only care about one particular use case that you are decided on, that this is exactly what I want and need from it. And also you don't care about maintainability and future proofing of your code that you're working on. While you're working on the game itself, and you basically realize that all of those aspects are as important as the feature itself. And then first of all, it took way longer to get that implemented in vanilla, even if I had a reference code ready and fully functional and tested over years. And then I had to also basically cut out some bits that were little weird, why this works this way, because there were specific use cases where I needed that particular use of that command, but it still feels weird. So it was removed from the final command. One thing that, for example, I didn't really care for when I was developing it as a mod was how the game looks visually when it's frozen, for example. So in the version that was basically in the version that was in the Carpet mod, the game would pretty much pause mechanic wise, but everything was kept being animated and could ragdoll and jitter, and I really didn't care because I needed that to control the game from the mechanics perspective. But if you think about it, players now can use it to create cinematics in the game, and for that this needs to look perfect. Yeah. So then you basically realize that you have a lot more work cut out for you when you want to actually develop it for all the people that can potentially use it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that, as the audience for the game, we're so focused on our own perspective that we fail to consider all of the other potential perspectives. And even in going back to wolf armor, the amount of people, like Joel and I, are not typically people who use wolves for combat situations in the game, and we've talked about that on the show in the past, but recognizing that there must be so many players out there who would like to play that way, I think is an important part of viewing any new features in a balanced way. And so the same must be true for technical features like this, in that the technical community must be begging for a complete implementation, and it doesn't matter to us what it looks like, because it just does the job and it gets us the gold truth about our farms. It gets us the results that we want to see. But as a developer of the game and as somebody who's trying to still contribute to a polished final product, you have to consider things like aesthetics purely because the broader player base is going to demand those.
And I think it's really cool that the use of a /tick command with on the surface, to my mind, evokes technical play. That the team was considering players that might want to use it to make cinematics, to make essentially little cartoons within Minecraft for video expression, like whatever it is that you want to do, because that's not the first thing that I would think of, and I think that's just such a great way to consider all of the type of play that feature could then be used for, or just, it's almost like you have to imagine emergent gameplay or the possibility thereof before you add that to the game.
Yeah, and one thing that is also a good example is with like wolf armor. Like we can make it as basically the strongest as we can make it. So then players who hold dearly their pets, they basically won't see them die. But then on the other hand, you have the community of like PvPers where we don't want to like throw that out of balance, where the success in a PvP situation would only basically result of how fast you can feed and heal your dog, because now it becomes this like unbeatable tank that in order to succeed in any PvP situation, you just need to create that basically create that battle wolf, and because we try to make it as undiable as possible, makes basically throws off balance other aspects of different playstyles. So there's also a very interesting perspective here.
We cannot wait to hear what kind of balance you strike, and we're looking forward to the future developments in the Armadillo and Wolf Armor, and presumably some more features that we obviously know nothing about yet, but looking forward to what 2024 has to offer. For now, though, that's where we're going to have to wrap up our discussion here on the Spawn Chunks. Nmon, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything you want to quickly draw people's attention to before we sign off, and where can people go if they want to see more of you and what you do?
Yeah, so right now, I honestly have nothing to plug. If you want to see more of the Minecraft development, definitely go to the Minecraft YouTube channel. We are posting shorts and longer videos when we actually show tidbits of how we are working and what we are working on. We don't have any actors there to play our roles. It's all developers. It's all us. So if you want to get us know better, that's the place to go.
Well, thank you so much once again for joining us. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show was composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community, where pledging at any level will get you invites to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the regular shows live when we record those in Discord every week. We also have our monthly Minecraft audio hangout coming out fairly soon. And as a reminder, the pre-show and post-show are also for patrons, where we'll have a little bit of extra chat with Gnembon before and after this episode. So if you're interested in joining, once again, patreon.com/thespawnchunks is the place to do that. We currently have 322 patrons, which is steady on from last week. There is always room for more. Special thanks go out to our content engineers, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, Party Voyager, and Yitz. Thank you all for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. A personal recommendation is by far the best way to share the podcast. Just tell a friend about The Spawn Chunks and that they can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and even YouTube. Be sure to leave a rating and a review on your favorite platform. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked on the spawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for the aforementioned YouTube series, and I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which is currently on a season break, but when you want to see us again, you can find us through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing online can be linked through joelduggan.com, including the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. We had to reschedule the chat about Rebel Moon Part 1, so that's going to be coming up on the 17th. And I've also started watching the Echo miniseries on Disney+. That's a Marvel series, so that's been fun as well. I'm Joel Duggan on social media, very easy to find, and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Thursday through Sunday, mostly building on the Citadel server in West Hill, but I play other games too.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, even to its creators.